Alrighty, welcome back everyone. It's Garlaanx here bringing you a new Neverwinter video, and today, as the title suggests, it's the long anticipated and waited for Warlock DPS Mod 23 updated build. So, as always, full disclaimer, this is just meant as a template and a guide. By all means, there are plenty of ways to achieve your hard stats. There's things that you can swap out. There's many ways that we can play the game nowadays. There's no incorrect way per se. Most of the powers are balanced. I mean, you have your really bad ones and your really good ones, but it pretty much balances out. Even if you're playing incorrectly, you're still going to be playing adequately. The biggest complaint as of recently is everything in the game is pretty much scaled except the latest trowel. So item level is pretty much irrelevant for the most part, which means that you can use pretty much any gear that you want. As long as you're hitting your statistical hard caps, if you're doing your daily Reapers challenge, whether you're just running advanced queues, random groups, even the dragon hunts, all of the content is scaled. So all of your statistics will be scaled to whatever item level content you're doing. So maxing out your character doesn't necessarily mean, that you actually have to do that. Unless you plan on doing, again, endgame trowel, which currently is the Rise of Tiamat. There is no item level cap, so you want to get your item level as high as possible by using the best items possible. But if you're not doing Rise of Tiamat, then you're basically free to do whatever you want. Now this is, as always, an endgame guide. I will show you the AoE setup as well as the single setup. For single target, specifically what I'm calling the dragon loadout. It's more geared toward dragon damage for not only the dragon hunts but also Rise of Tiamat. So without further ado, we will jump right into this. This is going to be a mixture video. We're going to use Rainer's character builder. Shout out to Rainer as always. Huge content creator for Neverwinter. Doesn't get the respect that he deserves. Character builder is a phenomenal piece of hardware that everyone should be utilizing. So we are going to be using a mixture of the character builder as well as in-game content. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this. Alright guys, and here we are on the character builder. So to start off, we're going to be looking at the AoE augment build. So if we go ahead and start by looking at our races and attributes, we are still using the Gith class because we do need that extra 5% combat advantage. And you're going to be speccing into dexterity and intelligence the whole way through. You're going to need that dex for the crit severity, and then the intelligence is just to boost your magical power damage. So let's go ahead and start out with the gear. For your headpiece, you're going to be using the Serene Hood of the Dragon Hunter, which is basically the updated Garisto's horns. The Tactful Leathers of the Dragon Hunter, which is the updated Bone Ribcage. Now we have the Mighty Vambracers of the Dragon Hunter. This is the updated version of like the Spike Defenders. We have the Sharp Long Boots of the Dragon Hunter for the extra 5% damage. This is an updated version of the Rusted Iron Leggings. However, it's better because it's not destroying your incoming healing. However, it is destroying your critical avoidance. So if you do get critically hit, you are going to take that full amount of damage. So don't think that, you still need an adequate healer with you because you will be taking a lot of damage if you're using these boots. For our weapon set, I'm choosing specifically to run the Celestial set, which is the Zariel set. Now this, you can use basically whatever you want for your weapons, guys. You can even use the Mirage set if you want to boost your damage a little bit. The Lionheart set that has, the 7.5 outgoing damage. The Fey set, Mastercraft, of course, is always a valid option. You can practically use any weapon set you want for the AoE situation. I'm just specifically using the Zariel set because there's no stipulations on it. I can pretty much get the full procs off it, ping-ponging between trash mobs. So I might not get all the full stacks but it doesn't matter. You should be clearing the trash mobs very fast. I was using the Lionheart set for the longest time. It is 200 item level less, but it does have that stipulation where you have to maintain your stamina, and I just honestly got sick of maintaining my stamina, so I now can shadow slip freely around, and it's not going to penalize me as far as damage goes. So the weapon set is kind of irrelevant. You can use whatever your personal preference is. It's no big deal. For our 3-piece set, we are going to be using the Mythallar, so the artifact, the necklace, and the belt, and that's for the extra combat advantage damage. This is a combat advantage DPS build per se, so you definitely want to make sure you have maxed out combat advantage so you're getting the full potential. As you can clearly see, we have 90% on all of our stats that we need, but the Mythallar is going to give you an extra 100 magnitude hit as long as you're doing combat advantage. Now the Warlock has 100% uptime on combat advantage, so this is why the Mythallar set goes very well with the Warlock. You might see some other classes still using the Demogorgon set for the critical hit damage, and there's reasons for that. Those classes don't have necessarily 100% uptime on combat advantage. The Mythallar set works out very well specifically for the Warlock. Now your rings, we're going to be using the Precision, which increases your encounter powers by 5% more damage. And then the second one is, again, personal preference. You can continue to use your Band of Air if you have one. You can use the critical ring as you see here, or you can use the 3% damage one. It is fixed now. I know it wasn't working when it launched. However, it does work now currently. So just be aware that if you don't use the 7% crit ring here, you're not going to max out your critical strike. Your critical strike will actually drop down to, I believe, 85%. So if you do use that 3% damage when you're closer, your crit will drop. Again, yeah, so 85%. So that's, again, it's personal preference. If you're using your Band of Air still provides mediocre damage. It's been nerfed. It's going to be nerfed again, apparently. So if you're still using a Band of Air, that's perfectly fine. Just be aware that your crit isn't going to be maxed out at 90%, which overall isn't that big of a deal. 85% is still plenty. You're still going to be critting just about all the time. And remember, this isn't necessarily a crit build. You're more focused on combat advantage damage. So if you go ahead and do use that ring, you should be fine then. As far as the certain pants, we have now switched to the latest stuff, which I'm using the Defiant top and bottom. Now, again, looking at this overall build, this is complete endgame AoE. There's no dungeon currently in the game that you need a total item level of 82,000. So, yeah. Is this irrelevant as far as AoE goes? Yes. This is just to toot your own horn and, you know, brag a little bit that you have the best items in the game, etc., etc. Do you need this? No, 100% not. You can still use the old items, max out the statistics that you need, and still do all the content that's currently in the game. There's no dungeon in the game that has an 82,000 or even 80,000 item level when you're specifically talking about AoE trash mobs. So what's the whole point of this? I mean, like I said, unless you just want to brag and say that you have all the best items in the game and blah, 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 and you're, you know, a min-maxer and et cetera, I mean, congratulations. But there is no practical or logical point of doing that. So keep that in mind. You can use different items, still hit your statistical caps, and, you know, be completely valid and fine. We're using the Neverwinter Standard, the Repurposed Phylactery, and Jewel of the North, just because, again, they're all 1200 item level. So if you wanted to sacrifice all three of these and drop down to 3 journals for the extra effects of the journals, yes, your item level is going to drop, but you're going to gain the effects of all those journals, and it's still going to be a valid build just because you don't need that extra item level from these artifacts. Again, This is a video, it's a template, it's a guide for you guys to tell you how the end game looks and what it should look like. But do you necessarily have to do this? No, of course not. So that is all the gear for AoE. We'll go ahead and jump into the enchantments. Again, these are all endgame mythic enchantments. Do you need mythic enchantments? No, of course not. Mythic enchantments are for the item level and the statistics that they give. You can see the combat advantage. I'm maxed out 86,000. I'm 4,000 over cap. I could actually sacrifice both of these and still be perfectly fine. I could dump these into accuracy, for example, if I wanted to. I'm just, why would I waste the resources, the time to do that? It doesn't matter. So again, do whatever you guys have to do to adjust and balance your own statistics accordingly. I have all garnets on the defensive side, and that is for the pure defense. Again, I'm using 2 amethyst and 2 jade, which is combat advantage and crit. My utility slot is going to be forte. My bonus slot is going to be action points. The combat is going to be the cursed burn, because I feel on AoE the cursed burn is slightly better than, say, using the other one, the poison thorn. Poison thorn seems to be more single target focused. The cursed burn seems to, work better on the AoE. However, if you don't have one of each, it's no big deal. The damage is so minimal between the two that you're not going to notice it. If you want to use a poison thorn for AoE and single target, it will work fine. If you want to use the cursed burn for single target and AoE, it will still work just fine. As far as our companion, we do have, the rank 5 mythic one. Now your overloads, again, completely optional. Rage of Flame is for an extra 5% damage, and the Devil's Precision is 5% critical strike and 5% accuracy, just to boost our accuracy. But again, if you do remove the Devil's Precision and that ring, now you're knocking your critical strike down to 80% overall, which again is still more than enough. 80%, you are still going to be critting a ton. As far as all your armor kits go, I have power and then combat advantage. Now again, these are wasted statistics, guys. These are 880 combat advantage each. You can put stamina regeneration over here if you so choose, because we're so overcapped. We're overcapped by almost 4,200 combat advantage. So if you want to put stamina over here and keep these, or swap these to accuracy and keep these, it doesn't matter. As long as you're hitting your hard caps, that's all that matters. However you get to hit those hard caps, that relies on to you as a player, you as an individual. Artifact class feature, we're using action point gain, and then we have accuracy on the offhand. If we jump into the boons, I'm not going to go through these individually. You can see the boons on your screen. Since this is AoE and you're doing numerous content, I do take all the damages. So your cultist, demonic, dino, and necrotic mastery, I do take all of these because I don't have, I don't feel like having 8 different loadouts, because, I'm doing, Schult mobs and I want this but not the other ones. I just take them all. It doesn't matter. There's no other valid options to really take, in my opinion. I mean, yes, you can boost your HP a little more. As you can see, I don't have all the HP, but I mean, I'm already sitting at 926,000 HP. This little boost here isn't going to matter. So as the game progresses and we get more boons, you're eventually going to max out your HP boons anyway. The only important thing on here is your Deathly Rage. That is going to give you 6% combat advantage, power, and crit severity every time you kill a mob. I mean, you have a chance, but it procs fairly often, so the uptime on it's fairly good. So that's the only important stuff there. Your stronghold stuff, again, doesn't matter. I have accuracy, defense, and revive sickness, but you can have, mount speed or movement speed. Irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Now let's move into the mounts here real quick. You're going to want to strive to eventually get Mythic Collars. Mythic Collars are very expensive, not easy to get. However, that is one of the end game goals. You want to get mythic callers. Even I, on the live servers, I don't have all mythic callers, guys. I'm working on it. I could buy them. You know, I have infinite money in the game, but I just, you know, it doesn't matter. It's all about item level, and the item level doesn't matter. So what's the point of spending, you know, 100 million to 150 million AD to acquire mythic callers just for the item level values when the item level values don't matter anyway? So I'm using, you know, Astral Diamonds, Encounter Powers 5%, Stamina Gain, Movement Speed, and then I still like the AP gain. However, some players have navigated to the 5% crit severity over here. So instead of AP gain, you get 5% crit severity. That way you don't have to use one of your potions. That's completely up to you. As far as your insignia bonuses go, these are an outdated system, in my opinion. They're all completely irrelevant. You're going to notice that I still have Warlord's Inspiration twice because I'm personally too lazy to change them. Mythic insignias cost a lot of money. You're talking about 4 to 5 million per mythic insignia, and you need 15 mythic insignias. Do you need them? No, of course. Yeah, it's item level. All it is item level. Do you need them? No. You can still run legendaries if you choose. However, if you're going to be, again, that end game player that wants to min-max everything, guess what? Again, this is an augment build, so Warlord's Inspiration is completely and utterly useless. But I refuse to change them because the overall system needs reworked and redone, in my opinion, because the bonuses are just complete doo-doo butter. So I'm not going to change them, even though I'm not even using an active companion anymore. I don't care about these mount insignia bonuses. I care about the insignias. Now, the combat power, I've actually switched over from the wings to the inspiration. Now, the wings were nice. And if you have other people in your group that are running inspiration, it's not going to stack. So you definitely want to talk to your teammates, make sure there's only one of you using this. If someone else is using it, then you can switch back to the wings. This does actually a lot of damage, surprisingly. I did some testing on it because I wanted to see. It has 3,000 magnitude damage, and it actually does AoE. I've hit up to 6 targets at once, and most AoE trash mob pools, you're only going to have 6 targets usually. So you're hitting all the targets. And then you're also going to get 18% DPS bonus for the DPS. The tanks get a separate bonus, the healer gets a separate bonus, etc. But then you're also going to get the 15% forte. And it's really good overall. I mean, even on AoE, I'm really enjoying this going from the wings. The wings used to make everyone angry because it would push back everything that was hit. So the inspiration here, coming from the Pegasus, actually really good, in my opinion. The equip power, since we don't really need any more raw statistical values, I went over to Ferocity again. Or you can use Providence? Yeah, Providence. It's up to you. Providence or Ferocity to get you a little more damage boost, but not a huge damage boost, but a decent damage boost. Alright, let's look at the companions now. So we are, again, using an augment build. The Festive Tiger is what you want to be using. Acute Census, because you need that combat advantage. Wild Hunt Rider, combat advantage. Golden Cat in your defense slot, combat advantage. Mercenary Discipline for combat advantage and power. And then we're using a Staldorf for, again, combat advantage. And then finally, we are able to swap in a Neverwinter Knight's Discipline, which gives you an extra 7.5 outgoing damage. Once upon a time, everything on here was combat advantage, including this other universal slot. But now we're still able to get our combat advantage to 90%, hitting our statistical hard cap, and we were able to remove a companion and now swap in actual raw damage. As far as your companion pieces go, they don't really matter. I'm still using the 1300 gear. it goes up to 1400. So that would be 300 more item level. You can actually push your item level to, over 83,000. But again, these are all just raw statistics. For instance, this one is almost 2,000 combat advantage. I can clearly sacrifice that. Remember, we're over capped by 4,200. I can clearly remove this for a 1,400 item level piece for different statistics. Mainly, you're looking for accuracy or power just to boost those. And that's completely up to you. Again, I'm still using 1,300. It goes up to 1,400 now. I'll swap them out eventually, but is it important? Nah, not really. Alright, guys. Last thing, let's talk about buffs. Again, these stats over here are 100% in combat, fully procced with everything, as well as buffs. Stronghold buffs, not a lot of people use them, but if you do, the stronghold food, I always use prime rib. Your invocation blessing is going to be random unless you sit there and pop a bunch of them until you get what you want. These two aren't necessarily important. Your elixirs and potions and event food, we're still using the same exact setup for those three categories. Wildstorm, potency, watermelon sorbet. Legacy is important. Hopefully you have a nice stockpile of legacy, because if you're not using the 10%, you are not going to be capped. You will have to readjust and rebalance your stats. I have personally thousands of legacy watermelon. I'm not going to run out anytime soon. So again, balancing your own statistics relies on you. I can only, give you a template of what I'm doing and what's been working. Scroll of Fate, not a lot of people use them, but there are plenty of Scroll of Fates available, just movement speed. Forger's Box, just because the Forger's Box does give 3% power. If you look here, we're only at 2.6% over. So, for instance, if you die during combat, during an AoE, this has a 10-minute cooldown. You're not going to get the max. Now, again, if you boost your power on the statistical side here, you'll hit it probably without even having to use the Forger's Box. Alright guys, so that wraps that up. We're going to look at the feats and the powers in game, and then we'll switch over to single target. Alright guys, and here we are in game. Let's look at the Hellbringer DPS AoE Loadout. So we are using Eldritch Blast as our main at will. We use Dark Helix as our secondary. Dark Helix does a ton of damage, so in an AoE situation, every time you kill 3 mobs, you get all 3 stacks of this, you fire it off, and it's basically having an extra, encounter power. Now, me personally, I'm no longer using the Curse Bite. However, Curse Bite is still adequate. You could still use Curse Bite. The Curse Bite build does a lot of damage. I have navigated over back to Blades of the Vanquished Armies. I just cast it on who's ever in front of me, essentially. That way you're still accumulating the DPS, and you're giving whoever you target that 5% self-buff for damage reduction. We're still using Fiery Bolt as well as Hellfire Ring. Tyrannical Curse with Soul Siphoned. We're using Dust to Dust and No Pity, No Mercy. No Pity, No Mercy is the bread and butter. This gives you 100% uptime on combat advantage. Dust to Dust is just to get that extra 5% outgoing damage. Now, the build itself hasn't really changed in several mods, so Power of the Nine Hills, Warlock's Curse, Risky Investment, Creeping Death, and Soulspark Recovery. Creeping Death and or Executioner's Gift, it's up to you. When I was using the Curse Bite build, I would use the Executioner's Gift. That way you do another 20% extra damage when the target is already 50% health or less. It's just, in an AoE situation, the trash mobs die so fast now that Curse Bite is just too slow. It cannot keep up with a rogue or a ranger damage-wise. Because everything just melts, everything dies. Even if you're doing the endgame dungeon Vault of Stars, the trash mobs die way too quick for you to be playing around with Curse Bite, in my opinion. So we do just use Creeping Death, which again is not burst damage. Creeping Death is a slow ticking DOT, damage over time. It's not ideal for AoE, but I mean, it is what it is. So these are interchangeable depending on how you personally like either or. So no wrong answer here. So there it is. That is the build for AoE. Again, I want to talk about the inspiration. You can see that DPS gets 18% damage boost. You gain 15% forte. And it does 3,000 magnitude. For the longest time, we were using Divine Intervention, the wings. And it was only doing 1,000 magnitude damage, which was, you know, a significant amount of AoE damage. It hits... as far as I know, they never nerfed it, so Divine Intervention will hit unlimited targets. If you have an AoE trash pool of 10 to 15 mobs, Divine Intervention was hitting all of those. 1,000 magnitude. The downfall was the pushback. So now you can clearly see that this does 3,000 magnitude AoE damage. Plus you get all the buffs. Again, the 15% forte and the 18% damage. And I did just want to show you guys that it will hit at least 6 targets, because there's 6 targets right here. It's going to hit all 6 of these targets. Now, again, you want to talk with your group and make sure no one else is using this, because they won't stack. If someone else, like the cleric or the tank, is using it, then you're going to want to go ahead back to the Divine Wings. So we'll go ahead and debuff these guys, and then we'll simply cast nothing but the Pegasus. Bam, AoE. Apparently, unfortunately, it didn't crit. Go figure. But it did hit all 6 targets. It did one-shot this one. It did one-shot this one. So it does hit at least 6 targets. And there you have it, guys. That is the AoE side of the Warlock Hellbringer DPS build. We're going to jump into the single target dragon build next. Alright everyone, let's look at the single target build. And this is specifically for dragons. So if you're doing Tiamat or the dragon hunts, this is what you're going to want to be doing. So not much changes, just slight modifications from the AoE side of things. We'll go through everything though. You know, obviously you're still Gith. Attributes, you're still going to spec into Dex and Intelligence the whole way through. If we look at the gear, it's pretty much all of the same gear other than some minor modifications. For instance, we are going to swap in the dragon ring. So it's 10% in damage against dragons. And then you're going to want to pair that with your Band of Air, your crit ring, the encounter ring, whatever other ring you're going to want to add in here. But the 10% dragon ring is a go. The other thing is your weapon set. Now, I've fiddled around with the stats endlessly and have only concluded that if you want to reach your maximum hard stats, the Golden Watcher set is the way to go. It's too good to pass up, just because of all the statistics you get from it. So you get power, crit severity, critical strike, and defense. You get 5% when you remain in combat, 5 seconds, etc. It basically has 100% uptime. Power, crit severity, and critical strike. The defense, yeah, whoopee-doo. But to reach your hard stats, it's very hard to hit those numbers. You can use other weapons here, but you are going to sacrifice statistical value. It's just the way it is. If you want to use the Masterwork set because you're doing the 10-man Tiamat raid and everyone's using Masterwork for the extra damage and outgoing healing and the damage reduction, that's fine. But just keep in mind, you are going to sacrifice your statistics. I've played with numerous combinations. You can get close to maxing out, but I just find that it's easier to use the Watcher set. Now, the Watcher set also isn't that easy to obtain, and a lot of people don't have it. You can go all the way back to Module 16 and farm the Master Expeditions, and do the Watchers and get them legitimately, or you take the easy way out and you buy the 30,000 item level booster pack that costs 5,000 Zen in the Zen store. I recommend getting a 20% coupon. It will only cost you 4,000. I did a whole video on that booster pack when it was released. However, in that booster pack, you will get a legendary set of Watcher weapons. So that is by far the easiest way to obtain them, unless you want to go the hard route, the manual route of actually going back all the way to mod 16 and farming them. Just buy it. And again, I'm not telling you to do that. If you want to use the Mastercraft weapons, be my guest, but it's going to be 10 times harder for you to maximize your statistics, trust me. Other than that, no major differences to the gear setup. Enchantment side of things, we did have to tweak a few things. So we are using Citrine ×3 here to boost accuracy. The biggest thing here is Poison Thorn. Again, I mentioned in the AoE section, if you don't have Poison Thorn and you only have Cursed Burn, it's not that big of a deal. Rage of Flames for the 5% damage, and then your second overload, you want that Dragon Slayer overload for another 10% damage to dragons. All power kits, all combat advantage kits. AP gain, accuracy. The boons, nothing particularly changes, except we are going to take 5 into Cultist Power, because if you're doing Tiamat or the Dragon Hunts, they do have trash mobs in there, so you want that extra damage. Those are considered cultists. But then just put all the other points into HP. You're not taking Deathly Rage on single target. You're going to take your Bloodlust. As far as the mounts go, again, Mythic Collars, 10 Mythic mounts for Bolster. Again, I explained all of the insignias and bonuses in the AoE. We don't care, just get them all Mythic. Your combat power, this is up to you. People still want to use the Giant Toad. That is completely fine. The Dragonbone Whirl will do more damage, but keep in mind that it is only hitting one target. So, if you are in Tiamat, for example, and you have trash mobs and you accidentally engage in a trash mob and not one of the dragon heads, the Dragon Ball Whirl is not going to hit that dragon head. It's going to hit the trash mob. So again, it's easier just to use the Giant Toad, but the Dragon Ball Whirl will actually output more DPS if you're hitting that one individual single target. Now the Ancient Dragon Hunts, on the other hand, yes, there is only one target, but you're also going to be knocked around quite a bit. So this is personal preference. The Dragon Whirl is completely up to you. Again, with the Ferocity or the Providence, it's up to you. Whether you have Ferocity or Providence, you want to have one of those for the extra damage. If we go ahead and look at the companion side of things, again, Festive Tiger, this is an augment build. I know some people are still running combat companions. However, in my opinion, the augments far outweigh an active companion. The amount of damage that the active companions do now is just not worth it, in my opinion. Especially if you're doing Tiamat, and even if you're doing the Ancient Dragon Hunts. Your companion spends most of the time dead. So it's not really providing you that much extra DPS, in my opinion. Having the augment, you're getting those full stats all of the time, and it's too good not to use. So again, this is an augment build. The same companion pieces, again, we talked about this. If you want to switch and upgrade to the 1400 to boost your item level, that's completely up to you. Again, we're using acute senses for combat advantage. We are going back to Fire Archon in the defensive slot for combat advantage. Golden Cat, Stalldorf, all combat advantage. Now the swap here is, instead of using the Neverwinter Knight, we have the Batiri for 11% damage to bosses, so for Tiamat and or Ancient Dragons. And then we also, in the offensive slot, have the Dragon Hunter, which has given us the Dragon Bane effect, which is another 11% to dragons. Again, this build is all focused on dragons. It's only for Tiamat and or Ancient Dragon Hunts. So that pretty much wraps it up. Let's just go down the breakdown here of how much actual bonus damage you're getting for dragons. So we're getting 10% from the ring, we're getting 10% from the overload slot, If you use a rank 5 or a legacy dragon potion, that's another 10%. The Dragon Bane Companion bonus is 11.25. If you have the Wanderous Dragon, specifically the Mythic version, that gives you 6% damage. And then this is optional. So we're talking about the reinforcement kits. Back in the day, there used to be a thing called the Claw of Bahamut, and it was 5%. So theoretically, you could have 4 of those. I don't know if they actually stack or not. I personally don't use them. I only actually have 3 of them in my collection, and I just didn't want to waste them, to be honest, because I don't know if they stack. So even using one, swapping one power out and putting one on would be another 5% to dragons. Most people out there watching this video have no idea what that item is or have been around long enough to obtain them. But they do exist, and they are, out there if you're an OG player. If they stack, that's another 20% to dragons if they do in fact stack. Now, I can't confirm or deny that. Someone on PC that has tested them can leave me a comment below and let me know if they do stack. I mean, that's an extra 20% damage to dragons, and you can fit that in here if need be on your power side of things. Sacrifice all your power reinforcements, put 4 Claw of Bahamut in there. Now, just for the bonus damage, you get 5% from your gloves, 5% from your boots, 5% from your ring. If you are using that ring, if you're using the Band of Air, then you're not going to get that. The Rage of Flames Overload is another 5%. The Batiri Companion is 11.25. Mythic Encounter-Only Callers, 5%. Your feet, Dust to Dust, is 5%. And then let's not forget, some people have forgotten about those Diamond Blessing, guys. That's an extra 5% damage. Going back to Sharandar and farming the Shattered Crystals. Once you open those Shattered Crystals, you have Diamond's Blessing. Some of you have held on to those. Some of you will have to go and farm those, but, that's up to you. That's another 5% damage. So if we look at the totals for this build, the total amount of dragon damage is 47.25. The total bonus damage of this build is 46.25, and that gives us a whopping 93.5% damage bonus for single target. That's a huge amount of bonus damage. So again, this is still a combat advantage build. I've also tested with the companion sides of things, of sacrificing combat advantage damage and putting in more raw DPS. So using a Minx here and then the Neverwinter Knight as well instead of Staldorf, just for more, you can actually boost this overall damage to about 110%. But your combat advantage goes down to about 70%. And it's just not worth it. Even in the scaled content, such as the Ancient Dragons, because don't forget, Ancient Dragons are scaled content. You're actually scaled down to, I think, 50 or 55k. The only unscaled content that you have is the Tiamat Trowel. But even sacrificing that for those companions for the raw overall damage bonus, but sacrificing your combat advantage down to 70%, it's just not worth it. Statistics are still by far the most important thing that you need to maximize and hard cap to be successful in doing DPS. Now, in the future, if we can somehow get our combat advantage to still max out and then stacking all those outgoing damage companions, that would be nice. And theoretically, you can still do that. So let's briefly talk about, if you're not necessarily going to do Tiamat and you're only doing Ancient Dragons, you don't need all of this item level. You just don't need it. So you can make adjustments. For instance, you can go and use the Combat Advantage shirt that we were using, as well as the Combat Advantage feat. So that's 10% combat advantage right there that you can swap out and then swap in another companion. This is specifically talking about the Dragon Hunts, though. The Dragon Hunts are capped at 55 or 50k item level. Item level doesn't matter at that point. So you can make adjustments to this build. Again, as I said in the beginning of the video, this is only meant as a template. I myself even do some slightly things different because I need that upper edge on, you know, people in the game. And I don't divulge 100% all of the information. But this is still a solid build. This will work for, of course, Tiamat. But again, if you're not doing or don't have any intentions of doing Tiamat and you're only doing your ancient dragons, you can make sacrifices and boost your character even further. Like I said, go back to the old combat advantage shirt here, go back to the old combat advantage boots here, and that will give you the opportunity to get in a Neverwinter Knight here. So you're basically just switching a couple items around, etc. So we're going to jump in game. We'll look at the build itself and the rotation as always, and then we will wrap up this video. Alright guys, and here we are back in game. We're looking at the single target dragon loadout. It's the same for single target no matter what. There's no changes between dragons or not. So we are still using Hellish Rebuke, secondary to Hand of Blight. We're using Hadar's Grasp, Killing Flames, and Hellfire Ring. Now, you don't necessarily have to use Hadar's Grasp. You can use Blades of the Vanquished here. Hell, I've even seen some Warlocks busting out the good old Dread Theft. And it's still actually viable. I mean, Dread Theft does a lot of damage. 510 magnitude. It's just not ideal. So, again, you can use Blades of the Vanquished, Hadar's, and it's completely up to you. Tyrannical is going to be your bread and butter. Still using Dust to Dust for the extra 5% damage. No Pity, No Mercy gives us that 100% uptime on combat advantage. Now, before they changed the enchantments, remember, we used to be using Deadly Curse and All-Consuming Curse because it used to double dip with the Bowthorn enchantment, and we were doing significantly more DPS. That no longer works. So there's really no reason to be using Deadly Curse and ACC anymore, because the Poison Thorn does not work like the Bowthorn used to work. So you might as well just go with the 100% uptime on combat advantage, and then you get the 5% extra damage. The build, of course, is the same as AoE. Nothing really changes here. Power of the Nine Hells, Warlock's Curse, Risky Investment, Creeping Death, and Soulspark Recovery. So if we go ahead and spawn this, we'll go ahead and look at a normal rotation. Spawn this big boy. You'll start with your Hellfire. Go ahead and pop your Hadars. Throw some stacks of Hellish on there. Cast your Artifact. Cast your Daily. Bada bing. Killing Flames. Giant Toad. Unload your Soul Sparks. And it just becomes a rinse and repeat game after this. Of course, watch the damage ticks. Damage ticks. Damage ticks. Non-stop damage ticks. Because, you know, of course the Warlock is still not considered burst DPS. We are still DOT. And there we go. Just keep mowing it down, etc. You get the point. Bada bing, bada boom. Now, the only thing I didn't mention when we were on the character builder is the buffs. We are still using Invocation Blessing. We're still using Watermelon Sorbet. We're still using the Flask of Potency. However, to hit that 90% hard cap for your combat advantage, you will have to use Sunlords. So don't use Wildstorm if you're doing single target dragons or single target overall. Switch over to Sunlords. And that's about it, guys. That is the single target and AoE. As far as the non-dragon version, you're just essentially going to take some things out, right? So you're not going to necessarily be using the Dragon Bane here. You could put the Wild Hunt Rider in there or whatever for single target. And same thing with the ring. You're just basically removing all of the dragon damage for single target, you know, for just queued content. But that's it, guys. That is the Warlock Hellbringer DPS guide for Mod 23 going forward. We will see what happens in Mod 24. That's all I got for you today. It's a long enough video. I'll probably end up putting timestamps in the video for you guys as always. Share it with your friends. Share it with Warlocks. I've seen some pretty new Warlocks out there that are unfortunately just doing everything completely wrong, using the wrong gear, etc. So help them out. Send them toward my video. Hopefully this covered everything that needs to be covered. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, as always, go ahead and leave them below. And yeah, I'll see you guys real soon.